Alrighty, hello every folks, and good morning. Welcome to another edition of Know Your Unit. Today we talk about the Blade Knight. It's what happens when the bosses start hearing boss music. So this is Hobyrim's unique class that was added in One Vision. Now, the fact that this class even exists has a little bit of context behind it. See, when it comes to OV, the Swordmaster class saw a ton of improvements from the PSP version. It's a class that has been a fan favorite for a lot of folks since Night of Lotus, but in the PSP version, it was god-awful. Like, in Reborn, they went for a more kind of balanced approach to the whole thing, but in the PSP version of this game, the Swordmaster was one of the worst classes, bar none, like, no question. There were so many limitations to it in the fact, like, they had to use consumables, to even use most of their abilities. Most of their abilities weren't very good on top of that. It basically cost you the same to go use the scroll on anybody rather than trying to use the skill on these guys. They were limited to one weapon type. It was awful, right? Now, when it came to One Vision, they were vastly expanded. They were given access to all different types of swords, whether they're tiny swords, big swords, two-handed swords, what have you. They had all of them, and they were given a lot more defensive options, turning them into that kind of master of all blades samurai archetype that they were going for. Kind of a mishmash of a whole lot of different things from throughout the series. But when it came to the Blade Knight, this is Hobyrim's unique take on all of these different ideas. See, just like the PSP version, one of the only Swordmasters that people used in the PSP version was Hobyrim, and so in this case, he's a class that is actually going to retain that limitation of being limited to two-handed katanas. However, he is basically the Jedi of this particular universe. This class is entirely unique to him, and additionally, it's got a lot of unique mechanics to it this time around that make it like when you use Hobyrim, you know what you're getting. This guy is the primo can opener of this game. Like, nobody bypasses defense like this guy does. He is a little bit tricky to use, a little bit tricky to get used to from the get-go. But this guy is, again, like the boss killer. Anybody that's resisting your attacks, anybody that is potentially a bit more of a wall in your way, he is here to cut through them like butter. So let's explain what this is, because this isn't a class that is directly powerful, it's a class that has unique mechanics. So, right from the get-go, let's talk about their access. Now, when I say that this guy is basically the Jedi of this particular universe, he is limited to two-handed katanas, but additionally, just like the kind of the Clone Wars part of the series, he's going to be rocking options for heavy armor, again, similar to the PSP counterpart. Bear in mind that the Swordmaster in One Vision is generally locked to far more lightweight equipment. Now, that being said, his skills are very, very unique. So, okay, so looking at this guy's skill list, it effectively looks like a mechanical tool running on overdrive. See, he's one of the few classes that will offensively utilize both of his MP and TP bars at the same time, and in fact, generating both is what keeps this guy a threat. It's a very unique way for any class to do anything. It's something that you really don't see that often, even in this mod. So, let me explain. So, to start off with, I'm just going to throw this out here as a little bit of an extra. So we've got Shadow Break over here as one of their abilities. It's something the Terenius can do as well. This is going to actually tie into everything else, though. So, Shadow Break is an ability that allows you to explode a clone. It will breach anybody nearby it, and additionally do your weapon's damage to anybody that's around them. So, effectively, you're stabbing your weapon out of all parts of that clone in an explosion. So, very powerful move right there, and a great way to open up. So, this is going to use 20 TP. It's going to explode a clone, breach the targets nearby, and heavily damage them. On top of this, you'll notice that I have a lot of MP skills on this guy. So Clarity to improve things here, Absorb MP to go and leech MP off of nearby targets, and additionally he's going to be running Tactician as well. On top of this, the old, I believe it was like Mighty Strike or just the katana make big damage go higher thing that nobody used is replaced with Al-Shaka in this case. So it grants Blade Spirit and charges MP. So Blade Spirit is going to be your katana doing additional damage, but it also will charge, in this case, a high percentage of their MP. I want to say it's something like 50 plus in most situations, but it might be something like a quarter of the bar or something along those lines. I'm not 100% certain, but what it does is that it gives you a huge charge of MP. So you essentially charge MP, you additionally get that additional damage on your attack. So you can do that to potentially finish something off right then and there, seeing as you're getting additional damage on your sword, but what you're actually doing this for is to build up MP. See, he has a unique finisher that shows up over here called Soul Strike. He actually has several unique finishers that show up on his list. So Soul Strike will burn all MP that you've accumulated and add it as unavoidable damage on your attack. So this means in situations where he can't hit, he can essentially hit them with his Ghost Sword. In situations where something is essentially too defensive for him to crack through, he can do locked-in damage, and you can use a lot of MP boosting equipment to essentially improve the max hit of this particular attack. This is in many ways kind of similar to a weapon that they added to Old School RuneScape not that long ago that was used in a very similar thing. That was the Zeros God Sword in that case, or I think, or was it Zeros? I don't know. It was like Ancient God Sword or something. But yeah, it's essentially a type of locked-in damage that absolutely annihilates things that are heavier on their defense, meaning that this guy is a primo boss killer in pretty much all situations. Because he's already doing heavy damage with a sword regularly. On top of that, once he gets elemental weapons, he can double stack those particular effects, and then you go and throw this MP scaling thing on top of there, and he's effectively able to, potentially take out 2/3, sometimes just one-shot bosses entirely. It's tricky to pull off. Building up that MP takes a little bit of a while, but this guy fares exceptionally well when, for example, supported by any, let's say, Dark-aligned caster, giving them access to something like charge, charging their MP and TP at the same time. It pays dividends in this case, and also kind of gives you that interesting, like, is this guy a Jedi because he has got a Dark Wizard supporting him kind of vibe? He's a Sith the whole time. I don't know that much about Star Wars, but I know that much. Anyway, so yeah, it's a very fun class with access to, again, exclusively two-handed katanas here, but also rocking heavy armor, just like that PSP version there. You can, however, go for robes if you would prefer to double down on that MP move. Because bear in mind, like right here, we pop a Magus robe on him, suddenly he's just added 38 to his max hit. So he can potentially just take this to the bank, So it depends on how risky you want to run it. I personally like running him, again, as kind of that Clone Wars era Jedi situation, going for heavy armor. But you do you. Now, his class is already pretty darn good as far as his speed stats go, so he doesn't really need that much in terms of support. Looking at his stats from the get-go, strength, dex, agility, and avoidance are fantastic, as is mind, meaning that he's going to be a bit less likely to be hit by debuffs. If you give him something like a robe, typically he'll do great on avoiding magic attacks entirely, but he will have a bit of a gap in his defenses when it comes to resistance. So just kind of bear that in mind. If you are running heavier armor, he will notice that. You'll also notice his unarmed attacks will carry things like the Flicker and Key Strike, allowing you to have a pocket stun move in the form of that Flicker if you decide to go down that particular route. The Key Strike, I believe, is just there just to be there. But either way, it's a fun thing to have there. So again, nobody really cracks open defenses like this guy does. Having a full MP and TP bar can see him absolutely annihilating things. Now that said, I haven't forgotten some of their other stuff too, like for example the Discord ability over here. If you ever are in a situation that you want to have one move that will completely turn things around, this feels like a move I can't remember the name of from Triangle Strategy, wherein effectively you're going and damaging all enemies in an area, but also healing your allies for the same amount. This is effectively the elevated finisher version of what every side-graded two-handed katana can do in one vision, where instead of just doing the spin move, he can do it over and over again, and he also heals allies for that same amount. One of these at the right time is just basically a win button. It is situational. He does have to really get in there since it is a close-range spin move, but it's a game changer when it happens. So yeah, this is obviously limited to him and only him, because if there was more than one Blade Knight in the game, it would throw the balance of this entire thing off. As it stands, the Blade Knight is a fan favorite for a reason. This guy is exceptionally good, so keep your Hobyrim alive. There's very few characters that are worth resetting for, just in terms of how damn good their class is. Hobyrim is that exception. Like, this is the guy you reset for. Like, this is the guy that you can understand why Ozma went and defected from her entire country and threw all her people in the dumpster for. You understand why she's pursuing this dude. So yeah, that's the Blade Knight in a nutshell. Lots of cool mechanics, lots of unique mechanics, and essentially a momentum build-up unit. Now, as far as their standard day-to-day attacks, you'd think that there would be a limitation, and he's fairly standard when it comes to day-to-day sword fighting. Obviously, he doesn't have access to something like a shield, so typically he's relying on the on offense to do the job. Rather than really being able to tank much of anything. The heavy armor is there more for thematic reasons, like realistically, even heavy armor and light leggings is not that great of a defensive loadout here. It'll do the job, but he is still going to be suffering in terms of defense. Like comparing next to the White Knights, he's got about 30-ish across the board lower defenses than they do. In this case, but he's got about double the avoidance. So obviously there's always going to be a bit of a give and take. He feels very kind of standard warrior-esque. Like if it was just down to basic attacks, basic warrior wins that basically every time. But as soon as his MP dump skills, like as soon as his bar dump skills get involved, it's just off to the races. Now, this does mean that he does have a little bit of a cooldown period between moments that he can go and spam this, but this is again why you bring in additional support units. So if, for example, you love spamming Discord as a move, being able to double TP, like let's say from something like a Lightning Valkyrie, is going to be really powerful there, seeing as essentially he will typically attack and counterattack. This will build up roughly 50-ish in a lot of situations, giving you a perfect opening to go and reset that Discord there if you like to use that. So any electric type magic users will be great for that type of thing. Any dark users, like especially if you're running like a Necromancer and you have something like Conserve MP, you throw a charge out there, and then you give him a full charge of both MP and TP. Now suddenly he's throwing out his Alchaka and going and doing a Soul Strike on the same turn, completely annihilating something out of his way. So again, a bit of a unique unit to get used to using, but he is exceptionally strong. I was about to go put this up, and then I realized after all that, I actually forgot to cover one of the most important aspects of this thing, which is actually his magic access. So if we go over here, we'll see that he actually has not only a unique ability on here as well, but he also has a really interesting suite of different things that he can do. So to start off with, we have the Ghost Blade. So what the Ghost Blade does is effectively project out his MP bar to go and stab something at a distance, effectively allowing him to more or less detach his sword to go hit something from far away. Really potentially a good sniping move if you need it. And again, just like the other one, it does whatever his MP bar says worth of damage, which means that you can potentially do like a guaranteed 250 to 300 once you get up there, to just essentially get free locked-in damage of that amount. It will burn whatever you've got, and at only a cost of 20 TP, that means that this can hit really far. So this is effectively like, the friggin' laser projection sword thing from Zelda or something. But yeah, really strong move in the right circumstances. You don't have that many long-range armor-breaking type of moves, and range 5 is nothing to scoff at. Additionally, you've got Shadowbind, which previously was a ninja move, allowing him to pin a target in place. Escalade, which allows him to avoid elevation, very useful on certain maps. Decoy, which is a great setup move that you should be using all the time, requiring only a paper doll to activate, as well as 5 TP, just allowing them to have a free evasion shield, pretty much available all the time. And on top of that, you've got Benumb and Bridle as well, for adding stun and silence to your attacks. And obviously, counters, dodging and countering with stun, pretty darn strong. On top of this, you've got your standard suite of Swordmaster dance moves for things like Lion Dance for strengthen and dodge to set up right from the beginning, Harvest Dance, which actually heals a pretty noticeable amount, and we talked about Clerics last time, so it's worth noting that those Clerics will similarly be able to give him Healcraft, which boosts this as well. On top of that, we've got Liberty Dance and Tremor Dance here for getting rid of debuffs, essentially an improved Ease 2, as well as a Tremor Dance for inflicting stun on enemies. His mind is actually pretty decently high, so he's got pretty solid odds of inflicting these as well. So either way, good stuff there. Additionally, if you're using something like Spell Strike, because this is technically a spell, it would allow for that to work as well. So yeah, that just on top of everything else just adds even more value to this guy. Anyways, let's continue on. So yeah, that's about that. So that is the Blade Knight in a nutshell. Hopefully this was helpful for you, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.